All right, so it looks like a few of you guys are joining in. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Be conscious of everybody's time. So let's get this rolling. So this is going to be a session on the new Cisco 9800 series controllers. Recently, I just wrote a course on the Cisco 9800 series controllers called Cisco 9800 Rockstar. And so I borrowed a few slides from that presentation to do this webinar because I keep getting requests from students saying, hey, one of the concepts I'm struggling with these 9800s is a concept of profiles and tags. So that's kind of the basis for this. And we're going to start doing a string of webinars over 9800s, DNA, bunch of Cisco stuff, bunch of Wi-Fi, bunch of security. So keep an eye out for that. From now on, hopefully we can use one meeting session instead of two to make it less confusing. So that was definitely a mistake on our part. But we're here now. And I'm going to record this too, so we'll make it available. If anybody missed this session, you'll be able to get the recording. So for those of you who don't know me, I am the principal instructor at Active Expert WiFiTraining and the author of this 9800 series program, as well as a few other titles. So how many of you have had a chance to see some of the digital courses we've been putting out recently?
I've seen some of the ICE training videos.
I've seen a few.
Awesome. Hopefully you guys are happy with that stuff, and we've definitely been working hard on it. You know, COVID changed all of our lives in a bunch of ways, but pre-COVID, I traveled 45 weeks a year, somewhere between 35 and 45 weeks a year, delivering courses on site. And since COVID, the only places I've flown myself or been regional or vacation. So it's been quite the difference with this COVID stuff going on. Have done some teaching, but I've also started doing the consulting side again, just because you can. You know, before, whenever I was teaching all the time, it was just back-to-back courses. But you know, the world's changed. So one of the things we wanted to do, and we actually started this pre-COVID, was, you know, we saw that there was a gap from the time that whenever I write a course for like Cisco directly, and they release it, from the time I write the course to the time it's released, it's a year at least. So by the time you guys get the content, and that's if you take the first class available, it's already a year behind. So one of the things we want to do is, we're still offering the Cisco training, of course, but we wanted to create some courses around filling in the gap from that, you know, being that far behind the 8-ball. And most people, whenever they take a course, they're not taking it as soon as it comes out. They're taking it after it's been on the market a while and people have given feedback and all that. So we've been doing a heck of a lot of development, as I'm sure you guys have seen. And, you know, at the end of this, we'll definitely get some feedback from you on what you guys think so far and what we've got coming up. So if you're not familiar with WiFiTraining, well, we've been around for about 7 years now. It's the training division of Active Expert. Active Expert's been around for, it'll be our 10th anniversary and 9th anniversary in November. So we've been around for 9 years now and going strong. And even with COVID, you know, we've been doing a lot and got a great team here. So it's all been pretty good stuff. Now, one of the things you've probably seen us release is not just the titles we have in right now, but we've got about 20 new courses actually in development as we speak. So I don't know if you guys have paid attention to how quick we've been releasing things, but there's been over a dozen titles released this year alone. So a dozen new courses this year alone. Some of them are micro courses that are designed to be completed in a day. Others are full-length courses like the Cisco 9800 Rockstar, the Cisco ICE lessons, all that kind of good stuff. So if you don't want to worry about just individual purchases, things like that, there's an all-access pass we offer now, $9.99 for the year. And one of the things that is, in addition to the digital course and micro course practice exams, is we're going to be doing a lot of these webinars that are live. So along with the digital courses, you'll be able to ask questions, and that's a pretty big benefit compared to just digital only, right? So just a quick shout out. We've got the next week webinar is going to be next Tuesday, the 24th. This is one for me personally. One of the things that I've seen, guys, over my career is I've helped a lot of people level up, skill up, gain new certifications. They've grown their career, okay? And unfortunately, I've also seen a lot of those same people after they have sometimes more than tripled their salary, still struggle with debt and, whether it's paying big college bills or, debt in general or just managing money. And so, I kind of had a self-reckoning like, man, if this many people are struggling out there after they're able to level up, get raises, all that kind of stuff, there's got to be something else we're all missing. So next week, we're doing another micro course, but it's from me personally on financial freedom for IT pros. So if you haven't had a chance to register for that, make sure you do, and it's on the store newsletter, all that kind of good stuff. So hopefully we'll see you guys next week as well. So let's talk a little bit about why we are here. Okay, so we are here because the lifespan of our beloved AirOS controllers that we've been using for the last 15 years is coming to an end. Okay, it's pretty much the end of our era. I know a lot of you guys in here have been working with Wi-Fi for a while. How many of you have actually deployed a 4400 series controller?
I have.
Who was that?
Jake.
Of course, yeah, Jake. So the OS and these platforms have been around for a pretty good while, right? It started with the AeroNet Series APs, these boxy-looking guys that came in. Whenever I was 17, I started with a company called G Capital, and I was the new kid on the block, right? So anything new that came in, I would be the guy that was basically thrown to go configure it. And back then I thought it was kind of torture and just kind of the hazing of the new guy. And man, I can't thank them enough nowadays because I got introduced to some pretty cool technologies very early on in my career that most people wouldn't have been able to see or work with. So it's pretty blessed in that aspect. But truth is, guys, is this platform and this technology, it's the end of an era. So how many of you, not just the 4400s, but all the way up to the 5520s, even the 8540s, how many of you have worked under the hood in the CLI of an AirOS controller?
I have.
So
Again, I have.
yeah. So anybody built any networks by hand from the CLI by chance in the airspace world? It's not too common, right? We're all kind of glued to the GUI, so to speak, because the code it's really clunky, right? There's no nested configurations, and if Lord help you if you do a show run on the thing, but it's just hundreds and hundreds of lines of code, sometimes thousands of lines of code, and it's hard to look at. It's hard to automate. It's hard to program, and we're just doing too much with Wi-Fi now. One of my university clients came to me with a problem the other day. They said that their CTO just gave them a new mandate for Wi-Fi on campus. And they said they needed my help to figure it out because, we always talk about that minimum data rate we'd like for people to be able to achieve, that basic service level. And they said they couldn't figure out the math because the CTO wanted to make sure that every student on campus had 11 meg connectivity across campus sorry, not 11 meg, but 11 devices per student across campus or 7 across campus, 11 in the dorm rooms. That's what it was. So they wanted to be able to support 7 devices per student connected to Wi-Fi across campus and 11 devices in the dorm room. And they were trying to figure out that minimum data rate thing. And it's just kind of, which is a different conversation, but that's where we're going nowadays with the amount of devices we're putting on the wireless LAN, right? So not only does everybody have a few different devices, but it's going to continue to grow. So here's the good news. The good news is, if I can change the slide, the good news is that Cisco's done some really cool things in the past few years with Cisco iOS XE. Okay, so iOS XE scares a lot of people because there was a time, not just a few years ago, that we had this other big hoorah about what was new with Cisco in the wireless program, and it was about Cisco converged access. Anybody get a chance to deploy the Cisco converged access stuff?
I think I refused to.
Yeah, it was definitely a fun moment for a lot of people. I was called in on this project, I remember, to go to California and help one of my buddies who has a partner there. First time I had to do a rollback in wireless, and I can't tell you when, just getting services rolling. We were trying to replace some AirOS controllers, couldn't even get the APs registered. So it was kind of a big deal, and it was fun. Let's just say that. But this was all the 3650s, 3850s, and 4500s. Okay, so it's all iOS. It's all iOS XE, but just so you guys know, it is not the iOS XE we are talking about today. So this is a new iOS XE. It's been much more thought out, in my opinion. There's always challenges going to a new operating system, especially one that's this capable and touched by so many different developers. But we're finally getting to be able to scale services the way we should be able to scale them to support the number of APs we're having to support nowadays and the more dense networks, all those new applications we're putting on there, and QoS capabilities like you've never seen before. So this is part of the reason why we're here is this new architecture, new platform, iOS XE, underlying operating systems based on BenOS, which is Unix, okay? And it actually runs an instance of iOS. So if you notice over here, you've got an iOSD service, and there's daemons that run just like on any Unix computer or services, basically for any other services we put on the box, right, or on the operating system. So what makes that cool is I can run like the WinCD service, which is the wireless controller service that runs on iOS XE, but I can also run apps like Wireshark. And there's also some flexibility to develop applications and have them running in this virtualized operating system as well. The operating system can be installed on any different type of hardware. It's very, very flexible, very capable. And one of the things that pertains directly to the profiles and tags we're about to talk about, just so you guys know, is those WinCD instances. We had a very hard time with our AirOS controllers scaling horizontally. Okay, so what does that mean? We started releasing controllers, or Cisco did, where you could have a couple thousand APs on one controller. And it's multi-core architecture and all that kind of stuff, but we were still running the AirOS. AirOS was not really horizontally scalable the same way that WinCD is. Whenever I have a site tag, which is something we're about to talk about, every site tag could go up to its own WinCD instance, for example, okay, and be managed by a different WinCD instance. So that's a way you can start scaling horizontally. Each site, even though it's on the same controller, and the APs are ran by the same controller, each site's got basically its own instance. Okay, so that's just one example. But this is basically the power, the software side of the power horse that is the 9800s, and part of why we're looking at a more modular way to do our configurations with these 9800s. Okay, so versus the way we used to do it. All right. By the way, has anybody deployed the 9800s yet? You got them in production?
I'm in the middle of bringing one up right now, but I run a 9800 cloud for a while.
Oh, okay.
For that, yeah.
Yeah,
we
that's
have six. We have six in or eight in production right now at Nike.
okay. Awesome. Cool. Yeah, so I've been a part of about a dozen deployments, one fashion or another. I'm not always the lead on it, but just our team helping out with people. And one of the things we do is kind of teach around the product line. I'll tell you, whenever it first came out, just like anything, there was some challenges, but I got to tell you, man, 17 code is where it's at, especially after a few of the last deployments we've done and writing this course. I wholeheartedly recommend this platform and this upgrade. I think it's a big step forward. So and I've heard the same, and that's one of the things I like to do whenever we do these sessions is just kind of get a litmus test from everybody on, hey, where's everybody at? Are you guys loving it? You hating it? Challenges and most of the consensus from everything else we've done and conversations I've had is early on we had some challenges, of course, and as the code has matured a little bit, then things have gotten much more stabler. And really one of the main feedbacks we had is the conversation about we're having now is just the understanding of profiles and tags and how that all fits in the picture. So that's why we put this together, and hopefully it helps. So the before we actually jump into that, let's talk about some things that, let's say we wanted to build out this topology. Okay, so if we wanted to build out this network, we've got headquarters site, we've got a few branch offices, we've got some cloud stuff there. Just your pretty typical, small to medium business. We're gonna need some things configured, right? So we're gonna need some things before we ever touch the wireless side. We're gonna need some things on the wired side configured, right? So we're gonna need things like maybe PoE at layer 1, VLANs, right? We're gonna need some interfaces, somewhere to route from. We're gonna need DHP, NTP, DNS, all that kind of fun stuff. We're gonna need that to be available, right? So we can put the wireless LAN on top of the LAN, okay? Now, one of the things that whenever we get to the wireless side, we're gonna need, for instance, the APs to be able to discover their controller. We're going to need some interfaces to terminate traffic, right? And so whenever we start looking at multi-site architecture, we've got this pair of controllers here at the main site, but we've got interfaces that terminate here, but we might not have those same VLANs, for example, out at site 1 or site 2. We've obviously got different gateways and things like that. Now, some of the options that we have with the Cisco umbrella is we've got the ability to terminate traffic centrally, and we've got the ability to terminate some of that traffic locally at the site as well. So, maybe site 1, we've got a, dark fiber, internet connection here or something, and that's a very powerful link. And we've got capabilities, and all the main resources are at the head end. So, that may work well for site 1. Site 2 might need the ability to terminate some of that traffic locally, and site 3 may as well. So that's some of those things that come into just Cisco services. Are we going to need central termination or remote termination, right? So, and of course, as Rockstar engineers like we all are, you're going to want to be able to control RF to make sure we're not doing the out-of-the-box crazy things that every vendor solution does with RF. And what am I talking about? Things like, channel bonding and 80 megahertz wide channels and all that kind of fun stuff, right? And using every channel available. So if we kind of go back here, looking at some of the basic fundamental things of what we build with our controllers, okay? We need WLANs. We need dynamic interfaces or interface groups. Big fan of interface groups, guys, even if you don't need an interface group at the moment, and even if you can use a bigger segment size, if you use an interface group, you can always add more, right? You can always add new interfaces, and you're not changing that part of the configuration. You don't have to take anybody down. The AP groups, right? We're going to need to define APs and say, hey, these are the APs you're working with, and here's some unique properties you have for your area because it's an AP group. We might need flex groups for those remote sites, okay? And this is all AirOS. This is what we used to build with AirOS, right? We'd build the wired side resources with the interfaces, then we'd start building out the WLANs, the security settings, AP groups, flex groups, and then of course our RF profiles, which came in 7.x code and all that kind of stuff, unless we did it globally. So that stuff we've been building for a long time. And by the way, anybody in here who's configured a controller, a switch or a router, there's all this talk about programmability and being a developer and a programmer. iOS XE, AirOS, that is all coding. You're programming these devices to do what they do. It might not be Python or C, but you are in fact programming each device to operate the way it does. So don't be as scared of the word programming as we use it here, right? So if we look at how this stuff kind of maps from AeroWest to iOS XE, a lot of people get confused because there's some new terms with things like tags, right? What I want you guys to do is really kind of take the tags out of it for now. Okay, let's put those on the back burner. Tagging's the easy part. What we want to do is just kind of look at how we configure the actual services for a wireless network, right? For an enterprise wireless network. So we've got things like the WLANs. We need to configure WLAN. Well, that's a WLAN profile now, okay? We need to terminate that WLAN in a certain way. Well, that's a policy profile now. You know, guys, if I wanted to have the same WLAN at multiple sites previously, what did we have to do before? If it was going to be terminated any different or have any different characteristics. The same SSID I wanted available at multiple sites. What did we have to do before? We had to build multiple WLAN profiles, right? Multiple WLAN IDs, and then just use the same SSID. Okay, so it's that same kind of concept. Well, nowadays, I can have one WLAN profile, call it WiFiTraining or WiFiTraining 5, and then that's on its own now. And as long as the security settings are the same, I don't need to change anything else, because guess what? All of our supplicants are going to be configured with the same security settings. So that kind of configuration, it belongs together in the WLAN profile. What's different is policy. I might want to terminate traffic by default differently at one site versus the other, right? And then there's a few other things we might do with the policy at a particular location. So then we've got things like AP groups. Okay, AP groups we typically did for sites or locations or a floor or things like that. You know, geographical area of RF, floor, building, branch, all that kind of stuff. That hasn't really changed. The difference is we now have an AP joined profile or a flex profile. And with those two things, you got to think those are very site specific, right? Because I might want APs to join differently or have different HA settings or different 802.1x settings or CDP settings at one site that has maybe those services, and maybe at another site it doesn't. So I need some ability to customize that based on location. Okay, so and then maybe I want to terminate some of that traffic locally that we talked about earlier versus not terminate that traffic locally. So that's a flex profile. Okay, and then the RF profiles we used to build and started building in the 7x code that gave us the ability to map different RF parameters at an AP group level. Well, guess what? They're still RF profiles. So that's the same. That we do that the same. And there's RF profiles for each radio. There's going to be a new RF profile for 6 gigahertz whenever that comes out. But just think of it as profiles and think of these as modular elements that now are much more reusable than we were able to do in the past. Okay? Because remember, just one kind of example I keep coming back to is if I want the WiFiTraining WLAN to be terminated differently at site 1 versus site 2, I had to create 2 different WLANs. So now I've got 30 different SSID or 30 different WLANs on a box to manage whenever there's really no difference other than how it was terminating. So by taking these features out and making them modular, then I have a much more ability to reuse elements. And that's kind of what it's all about. It's flexibility, gives you the ability to reuse elements with with keeping cleaner code, things like that. It's kind of like we started doing on the wired side with interface templates. Instead of writing 20 commands underneath every access interface on the wired side, we'd write one global template that says what should be there, and then we write one command under the interface. It just became more modular. Okay. Questions so far? All right, so the tags, where those come in, and the only place they come in, you bind your profiles to the tags, and the tags are what tell the AP how to operate. Every AP is going to have 3 tags, but they might not have all the same profiles. Okay, so and we're going to tag our APs basically based on are they working together or not? Are they in the same site or not? Or sites basically what does it for most people. Now, a site can vary in our terminology. If we're a smaller company, we might have two, smaller buildings. We might have 100 APs total, and that'd be one site. Okay. In a larger complex, we might have a conference center be a site. Anywhere we need a lot more control, or there's a capacity we really want to keep our site tags no more than 400 APs, somewhere around there. Okay, so and why do we want to do that? If you guys remember, it comes back to our instance that we run of the wireless LAN controller, the WNCD instance. Does that make sense? So we can scale them better and be more efficient with them by separating the tags. But that doesn't mean go crazy and just put one AP in each site tag for the heck of it, right? Anywhere that clients can roam and be within roaming distance of each AP, I'm looking at that as a site myself, right? Anywhere I can't roam between one AP or the other, those are probably going to be in different site tags. Okay. All right. So just to kind of look at the things that are in each of these profiles. And profile elements, we talked about, of course, the WLAN ID and the SSID. Well, if you look, we've got a profile name. Hang on one second here, guys. Let's see if this works. Got a profile name. You got a WLAN ID, SSID, broadcast SSID. Then we've got our security. And for that SSID, we don't want to have different security settings because then our supplicants wouldn't match, right? It wouldn't make much sense. So we want our SSIDs, of course, to be case sensitive, and we want our security settings to be common among them. That's why these guys encompass a WLAN profile. Okay. The other thing is which AAA servers we're going to be sending people to, and things like peer-to-peer block and band select and vSupport and things that matter for that WLAN or for that area. Okay. So one of the things we've been wanting to do, and we recommend people to do all the time, is limit the number of SSIDs that you have on your network. I always tell people you get 2 SSIDs, you need to sell me on a reason why you need a third. There is reasons why you might need a third SSID, but every SSID you have takes up airtime, takes up overhead, right? So hopefully you guys are already all aware of that, but this not only helps with the limiting of SSIDs, but makes it cleaner. So I'm not sitting there looking at 50 WLAN profiles on my controller, even though half of them are named the same, right? So that's one of the big things we clean up. Our parent company, Active Expert, whenever we do wireless consulting with a lot of clients, one of the first things they do is, hey, we need to limit the SSIDs. We don't need all these SSIDs. We can use ICE or whatever our AAA server is, ClearPass or NPS or whatever it is. But that can make the decision on where we get terminated on the network, right? So there are valid reasons to have more, but just limit that. All right. So the other thing that makes up this conversation is the policy profile. Okay, so we looked at the WLAN profile. Now we're on the policy profile. The policy profile is where we define that default termination, but it's default. In other words, our AAA servers may tell us to terminate somewhere else, and that could be based on any number of things, right? But by default, where are we going? Okay, and then also on our policy profile, this is where we look at things like AVC and QoS. Yeah, I'm seeing some of the pop-ups, guys, about the number of SSIDs, but they're happening so fast I can't really respond right now. But yeah, it's the SSID conversation. It takes a while, and here's the problem. If you light up an SSID, let's say for some reason, nobody wants to let it go. None of the business people or non-Wi-Fi people understand why it needs to go. So you're always going to have this kind of challenge going, well, we need that. Well, why? You need it. And there are some reasons why, and there were some even more reasons why back in the day, like who supports fast roaming and who doesn't, all that kind of good stuff. This is not covering that part of the conversation because we're focused on this profiles and tags this week. But just as a side note, your primary SSID, 5 gig only. That's another thing we do to clean up a lot of places. But the RF's got to be designed right in order to do that, right? Okay, so this policy profile, guys, is where we get back to sessions and idle timeouts. How many of you have had to deal with sessions, timeouts, and idle timeouts and things like that in your network causing issues? A lot of supplicants nowadays don't like to be kicked off every 2 hours, okay? They act funny. So that's something else, just kind of as a side note to, maybe pick up from this is, if you're having some intermittent roaming problems or connectivity problems, check your session timeouts. Some supplicants are not a fan of being kicked off at a certain time, especially if the RF is not, solid around campus. They might not get those 802.11v messages. Okay. All right. So, but here in the policy profiles where we've got ABC, we've got client QoS marking capabilities, BSS QoS. So at the WLAN level, terminating to the wire, and as well as the client side. ACL capabilities. So think of policy as, this is where I start basically wrapping around how this traffic is going to be shaped, secured, and prioritized. Am I going to do central switching, or am I going to do local switching? Am I going to do central authentication? Am I going to do local authentication? And then things like profiling, right? Now, prior to version 17.3, roaming between WLANs with different policy profiles was not supported. If you guys are not on 17.5 yet, major release, definitely get there. Okay? Or it might still be 17.4, but bottom line is prior to 17.3, if you had a different policy profile and you were trying to roam and you had APs that were tagged differently, you can't do it. Okay, it wasn't supported. So it'd be a hard drop and then reassociation. So after 17.3, it is optional, but again, you want to have some certain requirements need to be there, right? All right, so that is, these two make up, these two profiles, WLAN profile and policy profile, are essentially the favorite place everybody likes to go configure things on the airspace controllers. Whenever I go to the WLAN tab and I create a new WLAN, after I've already done all the other stuff that my controller needed to have wireless, these two profiles give you the ability to basically have a wireless LAN, have an SSID, all that kind of stuff, and then terminate that network for a particular policy. Okay. This is what it may look like. So, for example, I've got 3 SSIDs here. Okay. I've got WT Data 5, that's a wireless profile. I've got a WT Data 5 HQ policy profile, for example. I've got WT IoT wireless profile, and I've got a WT IoT HQ policy profile. Same thing. So for however many SSIDs, you're going to need a sister policy profile to deploy that. Okay. And those two things together are what make up your wired and basically the wired wireless LAN policy. Okay. So how we get that 802.11 traffic to 802.3, those two things together are what does that. Does that make sense? So I may have multiple combinations of those for a policy tag. Site tag, I'm not going to have multiple combinations of. I might not even have both profiles. We're going to get to that. Okay. So let's talk about the site tag a little bit here. First of all, remember we said before we could create WLANs, and before we created, the termination, all that kind of stuff that we were talking about, APs need to know how to get to their controller, right? So we need an AP join profile. That join profile is basically priming our APs. It's the global page in the old AirOS controllers, if you guys remember it. here's an example of what that looked like, right? This is just a segment from that, but it's basically that global settings, and then under the AP, it's the HA settings, okay, kind of areas. That's where all of this is basically come down as your AP join profile, okay? So the join profile, we've got, are we doing IPv4, IPv6? Okay, what's our HA settings? How are we going to handle AP failover? You can change our heartbeat timers nowadays. So AP send out those heartbeats every 30 seconds, right? If they miss a heartbeat, they're going to repeat the heartbeat at 1 second intervals for, I think it's 3 settings. It used to be 5 heartbeats. I think now it's 3. And then that will detect the failure and start the failover process to another controller. Of course, nowadays, all of us are using SSO, so there shouldn't be any failed heartbeats, right? Hopefully, at least if the service is critical, there shouldn't. All right, so, but then also, do we need Telnet or SSH access to our APs? So at a per site basis, look at this as kind of a house cleaning item. We need our APs to understand how to get to us. We need our APs, are we in a medical facility where we can't use the LEDs on our APs? There's a couple places to configure that. We could do it AP by AP or just do it under the AP join profile, right? Things like that. And like I said, if we're doing 802.1x for a site, we want the APs to authenticate using EAP-FAST or any of the EAP protocols. We can configure that at our AP join profiles. So this is more to do with the site tag. Think of as it's the settings I need for each location. So I'm going to create a site tag typically for each location or each site. All right. All right. And then a flex profile. This, you probably guessed, is where we can specify all the details we need for flex. Okay, so flex mode APs give us the ability to terminate traffic either centrally and authenticate centrally, or we could terminate traffic locally and we could authenticate locally. So it's flexible. It used to be called HREAP, Hybrid Remote Edge Access Points, back in the day whenever it first came out. That didn't sound sexy enough. So now we've got, flex, which is a lot sexier, I gotta admit. So in this is if we need a flex profile. And why would we need it? If we need to terminate that traffic locally at the site. Okay, so basically if in your AP join profile you say this is not local traffic, right? Then you build a flex profile to say what to do with that traffic that's local. So notice your native VLAN is right there on the first page there. Got our native VLAN. And then hey, are we doing Office Extend, things like that? And then you got the local authentication tab if we need local users to be configured, or if we're going to authenticate locally from the AP. So some people use this as, hey, I can no longer reach my, maybe my controllers failed. I've got these APs at a remote site now. They can stay up and terminate traffic. If ICE is still up, or if our policy server is still up, we can still send request from the AP, right? That's a flex feature. So if I need those types of features, this is the profile we have to create to tell it what to do at that site. And again, that's tied to the site. All right. So here's an example. I've got 2 remote sites and I've got a headquarters that have to do with our AP join and flex profiles. So AP join profile, we've got 1 per site, or 1 per site. And this is all site tags here that we're talking about. We've got 3 locations we're designing for. Why does HQ not have a flex profile? Because at that particular site, we didn't need it. We're centrally terminating traffic at the controller. We're not terminating it at the AP, so we don't need a flex profile. Okay. We only need that if we're going to do something that's flexible, right? That falls under that flex services. So Austin site, we've got at this particular site, and these are names of cities, but it could be building 1, building 2, whatever our site is. We've got some flex APs or flex services. We've got a WLAN that needs local termination. We could still terminate certain WLAN centrally and certain locally, but this tells it what to do if we want to terminate locally. Okay. And then Smallville, of course, we've got a join profile for Smallville and a flex profile for Smallville because it's Smallville and there's unique settings for it. So this is how we can start creating. And I typically, guys, whenever I'm on these deployments, and I've noticed a couple other people do it the same, I typically start with the site tags just to get them out of the way. There's a couple different ways of configuring these things, which I'm going to show you here in just a second, but it just seems quick and easy to just go, hey, let's configure the sites and get that knocked out. Configure my main join profiles, all that kind of good stuff. So, all right. And then, of course, we get to RF profiles. If you want to be a wireless rock star in general, understand RF, okay? Understand how this stuff works, because the majority of problems I see with most enterprises today starts with planning and design, not getting that right, not doing proper surveys, but then also it's simple things that if you actually understood, it could be just turning things off. Okay, so how many of you use all the DFS channels? Anybody?
We do. Yeah.
You.
Use all the DFS channels? Are we doing 40 megahertz wide channels?
No.
If you do 40 megahertz, it might make sense to use all the DFS channels, guys. Your Apple devices do not scan DFS, but every 6 cycles. In Europe, there are certain DFS channels it would take 10 minutes for the device to recognize. So it's
I
one
think
of those
the main
things.
reason we're using all the DFS channels is our densities here on campus. I mean, we have
What's
one
that?
building with over 800 APs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no, and if you have the density where there's an alternative, Jacob, you're right. So if my client who does not support DFS well and doesn't support 802.11v has an alternative that is not DFS to roam to, then he might not have a problem, right? But a lot of devices are not very friendly whenever it comes to DFS, okay? So that's just the way it is, and especially like your 121, 120 areas, 165, a lot of devices don't even know what that is. 144, a lot of devices don't know what that is. There's those problematic channels that, you know, you just need to be aware of and be aware of the clients and if they even support it. I can't tell you how many calls I've been on whenever I was in the field all the time, and it's, hey, I've got a dead spot walking into this room. Well, yeah, your client doesn't support that channel. It's not going to know what to do. So just things like that, and understanding, like I said, how DFS works and what happens if a DFS event happens. Nowadays, if we have all these new 9K controllers, and if you have the 9120s and 9130s, they have a designated DFS radio that part of their feature is to sit there and listen for DFS events, so you can do a quick channel change the minute it happens, okay, or the second it happens. You don't have to go down anymore, okay? But anything previous to all that, you had an outage, okay? And depending on where you're at in the world, it could be a minute, it could be more. So that's just one of those things. RF is, like I said, there's a lot of things to learn about it. It's an onion that never, gets peeled all the way, so to speak. And one of the biggest things in the last course that I wrote, the WLAN surveys course, I did a whole module on client behavior, and I've had nothing but emails from students going, man, our wireless network has literally changed because of this module. I discovered so many things because nobody ever looked at the clients, or very few people, or at least these guys who've been emailing nonstop about that. But if the client don't support it, or if the client can't behave properly, it ain't going to work. Okay. The other thing, how many of you guys use the algorithms for best available channel or 80 megahertz wide channels? Anybody doing 80? That's good. That's good. Um, there is one client out of everybody who's been testing 80. They have all brand new clients in a building, and it's a carpeted indoor building, and it's I'll have to get with old George to figure out how they're doing with that, but it's not common. Typically, we will okay 40 megahertz if it's a carpeted indoor space. 20 megahertz though is the mandate for anything high density, critical hospital healthcare, anything like that, and we limit the DFS channels because of the common. Whenever you got all these devices and you're supporting environments, you're supporting edge of roam and guest network features that you don't know what they've got on it, right? You've got to make sure you're using the least common denominator that everybody can support, and it's one of those things, right? So anyway, I don't want to harp on the RF side, but it's an area I definitely recommend if you're not comfortable or as comfortable as you should be. If some of the things I've been saying the last 5 minutes are foreign to you at all, then definitely speak with me, shoot me an email or something, and let's get you up to speed on more of the RF side of the house, because this is where the wireless rock stars live, who make sure that everything freaking works. Okay. All right. So we've talked about our profiles and our tags so far. And like I said, think of the profiles as how I'm going to build the building blocks of my services, and the tags of how I tell the APs what to do. Okay. So the profiles are the building blocks of the services. The tags are how I tell the APs what to do. Okay. So let's take a look at a scenario real quick. Let me see where we're at on time. Actually doing pretty well. So let's say this is a large healthcare facility. All right. We've got healthcare company, 20 locations, 2 large medical centers. And in those large medical centers, primary location has 3 buildings, 400 APs. Okay. Cancer Center has 140 APs. Convention Center has 80 APs. So, that 20 locations, first of all, we know we're going to need, 20 site tags. Now, do we need 20 AP joined profiles? Well, are there any differences in the way the APs are registering? Are there any differences in, are we sending to a different controller cluster? If it's SSO, it's the same virtual IP. Okay. But if we've got multiple SSO instances of controllers, we might need some different profiles configured. But like I said, if it's just a couple clusters, you've got 9880s, you're rocking lots of APs on these guys, or the cloud edition, either one. You might have one AP join profile, but you're going to need that for every site. Okay, and then you can reuse. So the Flex profile, what's different about that site? Okay, I typically do one though per location, an AP join profile and site tag per location. You got to have the site tag per location anyway, but what does your location consist of? For example, that primary location has 3 buildings. If you can roam between those 3 buildings, you're just pushing the boundaries of what Cisco, there's not a software limit that won't allow you to put more than 400 APs in a site tag. But it is a best practice limit for sure. So it's pushing that. I probably wouldn't put all 3 buildings in the same site tag. And if I can't roam between those buildings, I'm definitely not putting them in the same site tag. I only want to have site tag separation I only want to have those APs within the same site tag if I can roam between those. Okay. Otherwise, they get a new one. What about our 3 medium-sized centers? One with 85, one with 80, one with 60. Those easily fall into a site tag. Are there going to be any local switching with those? Or are these all coming back centrally? It all depends on the underlying wired network, what we're doing. Okay. But don't think because you see 20 locations, I'm going to need, 20 of everything out here. You won't. Things are reusable now. Okay. You will need the 20, depending on how you break up your locations, You might need 20, like I said, the site tags, but RF profiles, for example, is a good one. Let's say we said a hard limit, 20 megahertz wide channels through the main, buildings, and we're only using a few of the DFS channels. I may use the same 5 gigahertz profile for every one of my tags. That may just be our policy, and that may just be the way we build it, right? So we've got a few WLANs requirements down here. We're going to need WLANs for each of those, WLAN profile for each of these, okay? And then on the VLAN side, we're going to need a policy profile if there's differences there. Those things you will have to build. All right. Any questions so far? All right, so since we're talking about tags and configuring our APs, one of the last things I want to talk about before we kind of jump in the lab and show a scenario here is locations and filters. So this kind of ties into our profiles and tags. Hopefully we've got a much better understanding of profiles and tags now. Locations and filters is a big benefit from the 9800 series product line. So until now, how have you guys primed your APs? Let's say you got a new building coming up, 2 new buildings coming up, you got a couple hundred APs to prime. How do you do it nowadays? Oh, see you, Jake. So the traditional way of priming APs, guys, was there's a few ways you could do it. You got to get the APs in, you got to get the MAC addresses. You could have a controller at your desk or, DMZ controller somewhere around you where I'm basically registering the APs. I do their configuration, I save the configuration, put them back in the box, then have somebody go take them out, install them, and then they're ready to go. Or the other option we've had with AirOS is we could set a controller as what's called master controller mode and go hang all the APs and let those APs come back and register right to that master controller and get their configuration that way. And then I look up the MAC address and then I label it, I give it a name, and I do all the AP settings. That's the other option, okay? But I basically had to have the APs with me, and it was a lot more tedious to do those things. Well, nowadays, I can go ahead and build out all the settings that an AP should have. I can configure all the profiles it needs and all the tags it needs. Okay, so remember the profile is the underlying service. And then I can create a location. A location is a concept. You guys are using this, I bet. Probably don't even realize it. But this is an example of a location with CLI. So AP location name HQ campus, and then you say, here's the tags. Here, I want to tag the policy tag here that I created. I want to tag the RF tag, and I want to tag the site tag. Remember, I need 3 tags for an AP. So I create a location, and I tell the location what tags it's going to have. Well, all I have to do after that is just add the AP MAC addresses. Once I know the MAC addresses and I put the APs in there, they are pre-staged, pre-primed, basically can be pre-staged, pre-primed, ready to go with their configuration. So it's a pretty interesting thing we can do now, which would have been much, much more difficult with our legacy aerospace controllers. So locations is a way that's done, and filters is another way that you can filter out APs based on conditions and then do that configuration as well. So if you want, there's a new feature that Cisco released in the last version or so. I believe it was somewhere in the 17. I love this feature. It should have been out from day one, but it wasn't. A lot of people are like, well, what is actually running? I've got all these WLANs out there, but how are they all tied together in a nice, easy to understand chart, like what's terminating where and what names where? Well, nowadays on our controllers, we can go under the AP and look at the configuration it's set, and it'll show us, hey, we've got these WLANs and policies that are mapped to this AP. we've got these site properties, and we've got these RF properties that's mapped to this AP. So if you haven't seen that yet, your life's about to get a lot simpler with validating how your APs are actually configured. Okay, this is outside of using show commands on the CLI. All right, so in the Cisco 9800 Rockstar course, this is the lab that I've configured that basically I'm demonstrating all these things with, not just profiles and tags, but basically the whole course. So I think we still got time here. I think we budgeted a few extra minutes. So if you guys want, we can go ahead and run through a lab and show you guys an example of what it's like to configure profiles and tags, and hopefully do it in an easier way than what you're used to. So everybody still got a few minutes?
Yep.
All right. So what we're going to do here, we've got our primary 9800 controller here. We've got a couple APs. We're going to say that this guy is our headquarters and this guy is our remote site. Got a few VLANs, got a few networks, and all that stuff has really been set up. So let's go ahead. Let me, let's see, discard that. Bring this over here. And you guys still see my screen?
Yep.
All right, so this is a real 9800L controller. And just by the way, before we start this, whenever we talk about our policy profile, this is an airspace controller, or an AirOS controller. That policy profile, which is the main profiles you're going to be working with, okay, is the WLAN profile, policy profile. That's basically, this gives you the same capabilities as what this tab does, those two things together, okay? So I just wanted to reiterate that because I wasn't really showing you guys in the environment whenever we were talking about all that. So let's start here. So let me close this panel down just down here somewhere. So we're going to configure, we've got an HQ Austin site, and there is a HQ Austin policy here. So what we want to do is we want to create a couple WLANs, and we want to show how we use these profiles to deploy these couple WLANs. So the first thing we want to do is we know we've got WT Live 5, which is going to be 5 gigahertz only. That's the scenario we're going to work with, 5 gig only WLAN. We want to terminate to VLAN 50 by default. Okay. Then we've got a WT Contractor WLAN, and we want to terminate to VLAN 60 by default. Okay, so we want to limit the 5 gigahertz RF to 20 megahertz wide channels. We'll look at that. But then to illustrate the concept of, you know, how we can reuse elements and how APs accept their tags, we're also going to configure a branch office, a Dallas branch with the same WLAN but terminated differently. And contractor is terminated differently. So let's go ahead and get started. The first things that I like to do, as I mentioned before, is I like to go ahead and if we come in here, well, before we start, I'll just show you how things are configured now. So configuration and access points. And can you guys see this part of the screen okay? Or do we need to blow it up?
Yeah, that's a little better.
Is that better? Okay. So AP3 is over here. It's the 9120 AP. That's the one we're going to be using both, but this is how things are configured today. Okay. And I love this feature. This is why I wanted to get in here and show you guys this. It doesn't like being scaled up. So let me scale down real quick for that part. So if you're not on 17.5, you might not see it this way, just FYI. Or it might be 17.4, but I'm running 17.5. So you see the little network diagram there? That's the operational config. And look at this configuration status over here. It's like, it's unhealthy, man. It's misconfigured. So if you look at the operational config, this is how you get to this page. I just know that a lot of people have asked me about it, seeing the course, they didn't know where to get there. That's how you get to it. The site's misconfigured because I removed this site earlier, I think is what it was, but we're going to fix that. All right. So these are the two access points we have configured right now, and one of them has a default site configuration. The other has the HQ and all that. So just for now, let me just go ahead and switch this. You can assign all your tags at the AP level, and you can also do it a couple other ways, which I'm going to show you. But for now, I'm just going to fix that error, and then we're going to start building our WT Live WLANs here. So we can start off with our policy. I always build the policy first. There's a couple reasons. All your tags and profiles are under the configuration menu. Okay, let me go ahead and blow this back up. So we're going to come over here to policy, and we need a Austin to terminate our WT Live 5 to VLAN 50. So let's look at our policy profile real quick. I'm going to click add, and this is going to be Austin, and I just kind of do a to name what they are. The reason I do this, guys, and I put policy profile or policy tag, I underscore it, whatever the naming convention is, personal preference, because as I'm looking at code, which is CLI, and I'm troubleshooting, it helps me instead of just looking at names. Does that make sense? So that's just kind of a tidbit there. Maybe it'll help you. So we're going to say this is Austin text policy profile. We'll enable this, and this does nothing. None of these profiles does a thing until they are assigned. You can create these all day long, have fun with it. It's not going to do anything until it's assigned. Kind of like an access list, right? You can create those all day long, won't do a thing until you've applied it. So this is our new Austin policy profile. And the main thing we want to do on this is define where we're going to terminate by default. Okay, so if we look back at our network topology, we saw that contractor was VLAN 60. Another tidbit, if you're not already doing this, guys, is you should be using the name instead of numbers for VLANs. Everybody already doing that? So I want to match this, right? Well, we're doing 50 first. So I go back here. This is WT Live 5, Austin. And then we're going to throw this guy in data. And there it is. I've already got the SVIs already created according to the lab, so we're just mapping it. And remember, this is a default mapping, okay? We can override it with AAA if we needed to, but that's just, this is the minimum we need for policy profile. Do we want profiling and things like that? We can go ahead and enable that if we do. HTTP, DHP, and then QoS settings. What do we want to do there? This is going to be another one of these webinars. We're going to talk about QoS because there's so many cool features we can do with these new controllers. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and keep it simple, apply to device. Okay, so now we've got a WT Live Austin policy profile. So I'm going to need two of those, right? We're going to need a WT Live, or sorry, WT Contractor, and then Austin policy profile. I'll go ahead and enable it. Access policies, we're going to throw them under contractors. Okay. And normally we would background it and all that kind of stuff, but this is just quick and dirty to illustrate this concept. All right. So that's as easy as it was to create two basic policies that are going to take our wireless LAN traffic and terminate it on the wired side. Now, why did I create the policy profile first, you might ask? Well, one of the ways to deploy these things, and you can easily add, if I already have an AP, let's say at HQ, right? Remember, HQ is my Austin site. It was already there. AP is already running there. One of the ways I can do this to make it easy is if I configure that policy, I can come right over here to WLANs. I'm going to create my new WLAN now. WT Live 5, SSID 4, and to cheat right now for 5 gigahertz only, we're going to do it at the WLAN layer, just to keep things within our timeline because we're getting there. Broadcast SSID, security, which use our security type, and that could be, whatever it is we're doing, WPA2, WPA3. We could define our AAA servers, our authentication list. I've got a default set up, that's fine. And then I've got things like, hey, do I want to do band select? No, it's 5 gigahertz only network. We've got all those advanced settings, well, most of them. You notice you don't see any flex advanced settings like you used to on the Air OS stuff. But I do have things that pertain to this WLAN like 802.11k, 802.11ax, and V information as well, V controls. Okay, so we'll go ahead and apply this to the device, but check this out. So now that I've got this WT Live 5, add policy to tags. So if I create, and I kind of messed up here because normally I create the site tag first, but we already had HQ. So if we add this policy to tag, then we can click add and say we want to do this to HQ and the policy profile that we just created for WT Live 5 right here under the WLAN. So if we use that order to create things, it's very simple to just go, oh, there you go, and it saves me a step. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Most of the people I know, guys, are configuring these things nowadays. They're coming down here to the wireless setup and they're using either the basic wizard or the advanced wizard. You don't have to do that. It's all right here under your tags, okay, and under your profiles. So underneath, if we go look at our APs again, we now have our WT Live 5 up and running that easy with just those two items. Now, I didn't do that with our contractor, so let's go ahead and do that. Remember, I've already created the policy profile for this guy. So it's here, and I'm breaking my own rules about number of SSIDs, but it's just a freaking example. So again, you notice you don't see that apply option from the WLAN until you've told the WLAN that, hey, yes, this is good. I'm using whatever I'm using here. I'm going to use default again. We'll click apply. And now that I've got that, now I can click back into it, add policy to tags, right? So it's basically, and that comes from, it has to be written before you can apply it. You know what I mean? Because as we're in here in the GUI, it's basically caching those commands. It's only once you click apply that it's applying that config. So this is our WT contractor, save, update, apply to device. If we go back to our APs, you can see this guy now has all these WLANs. Makes me kind of get uneasy seeing that many WLANs, but again, it's an example, okay? And all of it's tagged because it's already under HQ, right? We already had that there, but now we need the Dallas branch. That's a different site. So what we're going to need for that is a few things. We're going to need to tell the create a Dallas site tag, and we're going to need to tell it how to get how AP should be joining, right? So if we look over here, AP join, And underneath our join profile, what we just learned about, we got our WT Dallas join profile. Do we want the LED on? What's our NTP server? Basic stuff. Okay. Are we doing the UX APs? God, man, don't get me started on that. We've got our cap lap timers. Here's our defaults, right? So heartbeat every 30 seconds, right? All that kind of good stuff. I've still got people joining teams, unfortunately. What's our controller names? So if it's C9800 and then our IP address, we go ahead and throw that in there. I believe, I know the IP address, but I think that's right. 110. So if it was different at a site, we would need a different profile for that, right? And then, like we said about security, is there credentials we want to use for .1x, right? Do we want to allow user authentication at that access point? That's the different options you have under a join profile nowadays. Do we want to allow SSH to it, right? For people to be able to run debugs or whatever on it. So once I've got my Dallas join profile, because I'm building over here now, we're going to need a couple other things too, because we need to be able to terminate WT Live 5, for example, on VLAN 200. So you guys remember what I need to be able to do that? What profile do I need?
Is that the flex profile?
Well, so that could be a little bit tricky. I just said VLAN 200. Well, is that in Dallas? You know what I mean? Or is it local? Because with we have the ability now. Flex is really if we're going to terminate locally, which we are. But if it was a different site, it's do we want that flex capability, right? Do we want the ability for the AP to stay up and then the AP terminate the traffic itself? If so, then we're going to need a flex profile that can do that, right? So, but at that site, we might have the need to just say, hey, here, these APs need to terminate traffic on VLAN 200. So let's look at our policy profile real quick. And we're going to do our, what is the WT Live. And this is Dallas. So we're going to say status, it's enabled. And then are we doing central switching? Well, we said no to that, right? Because we're doing terminating to VLAN 200 over here. So we're going to choose that we're not doing that. We're doing central authentication, but we're not doing central switching. All right. So what's our access policies? Then where are we going to put people? So there is not configured yet. So we'll just do 200. Okay, so now we've got our policy profile for how that WLAN can terminate in our Dallas branch. We need a site tag for Dallas. And then we need our, we already have though, our wireless profile, right? Because we can use the same one we had earlier. So here's our Dallas. And do we need local authentication? Is there a native VLAN we need to match by default? Those are the types of things, if the AP is going to be operating on its own, that if we were going to do flex, we could do. So with that policy profile actually gives us the ability, if we don't need those flex options, to terminate a little differently. So we could say, let's say this is 200, and maybe that's just the one VLAN there to keep it simple because I don't want to have to recreate all that. But if we had other VLANs to distribute from these APs, come in here under the flex options and we could create all that, right? So go ahead and apply that. So our Austin site does not need a flex profile. if we are terminating locally there at that site and we want the APs to be in flex mode, then we need the flex profile. Okay. So the next thing we need, tag for that site. So we'll come in here under our tags and we're going to say this is our Dallas branch. All right, and we've got our AP join profile, Dallas join profile, enable local site. So if it's not a local site, if it's a local site and we're just saying, hey, we want to terminate locally at that same campus, then we would leave it as a local site. This is the difference that I was talking about there. I don't remember who asked the question, but it's only if I need those flex options do I need that flex profile. If I just want to take traffic and terminate it locally, authenticate centrally, that's not I can do that either or. But if I want to have flex mode type configurations, that's whenever we say, hey, it's not local. This is out on another site. We want to be able to terminate locally. That's where that flex profile comes in. So now we've got our site tag. RF, we can use our existing RF tags because like I said, we may only have those RF profiles, the same RF profiles out there. So policy, we've got our HQ policy tag. Now this is where you can also do this in a couple places because we could come over here to our policy. And now that we've got it, let's look Dallas. Oops. Sorry, WLANs. Where we've got our WT Live 5, add policy to tags, and we've got the ability here to go, you know what, let's put this on, oops, that's on the HQ. Hang on one second. We missed our policy tag. I knew I was forgetting something. Because this site is different. So we're going to do Dallas, and I'll just, you can do it two ways. You can add it from here, or you can add it from the WLAN section I was just at. So if we want to from here, we could just say, look, we're going to do WT data 5 at this site now, or at this, with this policy, we're going to do WT data 5, and we're going to map it to WT data 5 policy profile. So that's another reason, guys, that I use those underscores to label everything. It just makes it cleaner, easier to see, all that kind of good stuff. So now we've got a Dallas policy tag. We've got a Dallas branch site tag. And we've got a default RF tag. So then it comes down to, do I want to create a location for my APs? How do I want to configure our APs, right? So I could say, hey, I want these guys to be able to be configured differently, and I can do that from here. I can do it from the AP page. Right here doesn't give us a lot of details other than the MAC address, right? So, but at scale, that's definitely the way to do things, okay? All right, so if we go back to our access points, and let's say we want AP3 here to be configured. Hang on one second. You see AP3 had the previous configurations from HQ. If we change that, and we're using default, or we could use HQ either way, whatever works. So the point of this, guys, is I don't need to create each of these things for everything we do. What Cisco's done is just made the structure of commands much more modular to have things be able to be reused without having to duplicate a lot of unnecessary code. Because the more code we have, the harder it is to troubleshoot and all that kind of good stuff, right? So that's kind of the goal behind this and running more efficient. All right. Do we have any other questions about this? We didn't do WT contractor, but we've done a remote site and we've done 2 at the main site. So
No, all looks good.
yeah. Any questions about the profiles themselves or process or anything to do with profiles and tags today? All right, and this AP should be back up now. So now, look at the mode of the AP. Did you see me have to change an AP mode? It happened because a flex profile was assigned. So now that AP is back up, all the new services we built are on that AP. And one other cool thing, if you guys have not seen it, because it's like one of the greatest features ever, dark mode.
I will have to check and see if I've enabled that.
Check that out, right?
It's pretty cool.
Pretty cool. Dark mode. I've been wanting that forever, man. There's too much white, bright lights going on. So yeah, guys, hopefully this helps some with the profiles and tags and why Cisco's doing what they're doing with it. We're going to be, as I said, doing a lot more of these over the coming weeks and months. So just kind of watch out for the newsletters if you enjoyed it. You guys will get a little survey that says about today and just kind of what you thought and what you want to see in the future is the big point. So we can kind of keep these going. So you think it was helpful? Good stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful.
Everybody a bit more comfortable with the new 9800 profiles and tags?
Yeah. Beats doing this on a production environment controller, so.
Yeah, what was that?
Said beats doing this on our production environment controller.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things, guys, is the cloud edition, you can install that on anything. So you can literally work with, you don't have to have, I know I was pretty upset to see that the list price of the little 9800L was like 10 grand. So even as a partner, if you want to buy one for a lab, it's like, it's a couple $1,000s. They used to be $200 whenever they were 3504s as a partner to practice, right, for labs. So what I would say is if you want to practice this stuff, and I'm a big proponent of that, the 9800Ls, you can download and install them on anything. And, all the syntax, all the code is the exact same way. You can install it. Nowadays, you can install it in VirtualBox. That's kind of the point of the new code. So what would you guys like to see if we do another one of these on 9800s pretty quick? What would you guys like to see next? Is there anything that's challenging or confusing to you about the new architecture?
For me, I'm dealing with an issue with setting up SSO that redundancy. So that'd be something of interest.
Okay. You're having an issue with it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we can definitely talk HA and SSO. Which code are you on? Just curious.
17.3.
Okay. Yeah, we could do one on SSO. I've already got some content for that, so maybe I'll put that like 2 weeks out. Maybe if I've got time, possibly next week. I was actually filling in this week. We're gonna have somebody else that was doing this for us, but there's been a lot of people out sick with COVID, so hopefully you guys are all staying healthy, all that kind of stuff too. So crazy time right now. And if you have questions, if that's holding up production, man, just ping me offline. Shoot me an email, Chris at WiFiTraining.com, and happy to help you, man. It's not a problem.